Our behavior and our positions on such things as marriage, human life, and personal responsibility are all guided by our values and principles. Father John Sims Baker and Dr. Paul Lim are here to continue our discussion of faith and values. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Great to be here again.
Well, Father Baker, you were making some closing comments before I went to break.
Oh, no, that summed it up. I really think that idea of the of being called, of being purified, to really live the gospel and to rely on the methods of the gospel. You know,
Well-
that Jesus Christ had no, for example, himself, any sort of institutional backing.
Right.
Well, we just had an election, and and there's some unhappy people in America because their candidates lost.
Right.
What would you tell those people that are grieving and they're dreading the next 4 years? If they're Christians, where should their mindset be?
I think their mindset ought to be, as Father Baker mentioned, ought to be, if you're a Christian, ought to be in Christ. I mean, I think it's whether a Republican wins it or a Democrat wins it, well, now we know who won, but
Yes.
I think it's absolutely crucial for us to keep our focus on the times of Jesus and his disciples. As Jesus had no imperial backing, had run into a lot of trouble with the religious authorities of his day. So he was, in some ways, kind of a maverick, not on the loose, but on a mission, right? The mission was that of love, that of revealing who God was and what God was up to. And I think it is very important for us to exemplify that sort of reality. I mean, I was reading this morning, actually, a book by Hans Urs von Balthasar, a Catholic theologian, called Engagement with God.
Yes.
And in it, he says the most important kind of theological and existential reality for us to focus on is that of the cross of Jesus Christ. So what does that mean? What does the cross have to do with Capitol Hill? What does that have to do with how we govern ourselves?
Right.
Much to do with it. But I think rather than saying that since my party lost, it's all doomsday, since my party has won,
Right.
it's going to be a delightful second coming, I think we want to be careful about that.
Right, and one of the things that I strongly believe is that if you're going to change the culture in America, that a lot of that's going to be done on our knees. I do believe strongly that prayer changes things, and both political parties have disappointed us again and again, so America doesn't have a political solution.
And I would agree with you, that word that you use of culture, that's what really needs to change more than government.
Yes.
When the culture changes, the government will change. And to focus on, and I think a lot of these disputes that we find ourselves in, or these struggles or even misunderstandings, not really understanding where each other are coming from. Again, I don't want to harp on this, but like the
Right.
controversy last year in Vanderbilt, I think really comes down to a fundamental difference of culture,
And
really.
worldview, because the people that instituted the policy that some of us, feel that we can't live with because we believe it's wrong, they're very sincere. And they believe they're doing the right thing as strongly as many of us believe that they're doing the wrong thing, but they're very sincere. And Americans are talking past each other. And some of the people that really do know, they know what our nation is about as far as our Constitution, First Amendment rights. They've allowed themselves to be intimidated, I believe, that a lot of Americans who know right from wrong are too afraid to speak up.
Well, and I think that's that question of culture too. Is this going to be a culture where faith and values are legitimate in the public sphere or not? And I think that's the real debate.
I think that I agree with that, and it just seems like right now the secularists, and they are a tiny percentage of the population, that somehow they've imposed rules where the majority of us can't speak the way we'd like to speak.
I think that's absolutely true on the one hand, but I think we also have to think about the excluded middle. I think there are a lot of people who are not extremists, whether left wing or the right wing. And I've often said this to my friends and colleagues, that the left wingers and the right wingers, they have a lot more in common than they're willing to admit.
But they're not talking to one another.
They're not talking to one another. So I think, if we don't get to do that in colleges, then where else are we going to do it?
Absolutely.
And I think,
Thank you.
okay.
In just a moment, I'll be joined by 3 college students to share their perspectives on the state of faith and values in America. Stay with Be the People.